Locked and loaded, President Trump delivers a bold warning to North Korea about the U.S. military. We're at the White House. Public health crisis. President Trump declares opioid abuse a national emergency, how that will impact the fight against drug addiction in America. Stopping euthanasia. A report from Rome on the Holy Father's order for one Belgian Catholic charity. And fighting for life through song.
What was your name? What were you meant to be?
One artist's story of living out her faith through music. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, August 11th, 2017. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. President Trump warns North Korea America is locked and loaded, ready to defend itself from any threat. This just 2 days after North Korea laid out its plans to launch missiles towards the U.S. territory of Guam. Correspondent Mark Irons is following the war of words from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump says he's not daring North Korea to launch an attack. He just wants to make it clear they better not.
He's not getting away with it. It's a whole new ballgame.
The president delivering a bold warning to Kim Jong-un. He should not provoke America.
He does something in Guam, it will be an event the likes of which nobody's seen before, what will happen in North Korea.
Trump responding to North Korea's threat to launch missiles towards the U.S. territory of Guam. Today he tweeted, "Military solutions are now fully in place, locked and loaded should North Korea act unwisely. Hopefully Kim Jong-un will find another path." Scott Snyder, an expert on U.S.-Korea policy, says the president's heated language is fueling tensions.
It's incumbent upon the administration to also explore possibilities for dialogue and not just issue threats, and we all hope that there's a strategy behind the rhetoric.
North Korea's threats may be alarming, but the governor of Guam says they're used to it.
So there is concern and there is fear from some parts, but there's also general calm, understanding that this is not the first time.
If threats turn to combat, America's allies say they'll fight alongside us. The Prime Minister of Australia speaking to reporters after a conversation with Vice President Mike Pence.
We stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States. The ANZUS Treaty means that if America is attacked, we will come to their aid.
A former Vatican diplomat doesn't want it to reach that point. Archbishop Silvano Tomasi calls for dialogue and negotiations, telling Vatican Radio, "The way of conflict is always the wrong way." Still, Snyder says things could get worse before they get better.
I think the tensions are likely to escalate a little bit further before we get to a point where they will be defused.
Snyder does not call this a crisis, but he does expect tensions to rise later this month when the U.S. will carry out large-scale military exercises in South Korea. North Korea sees these annual drills as a rehearsal for war. Wyatt?
Mark, we keep hearing all of the threats, but what about the sanctions that were supposed to convince North Korea to back off?
The president meets with UN Ambassador Nikki Haley today. She played a large role in negotiating those sanctions. Now, Scott Snyder, the North Korean expert that we spoke to in our story, says sanctions could be effective, but reminds us that North Korea is a master of finding ways around those sanctions.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thanks, Mark. President Trump officially declares the opioid crisis a national emergency and has instructed his administration to respond to the crisis. Trump made the announcement in front of reporters while on his working vacation in Bedminster, New Jersey yesterday. He told reporters, quote, "We're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money on the opioid crisis." To explain how the government is trying to tackle the opioid crisis, we're joined by Kimberly Leonard, senior healthcare writer for the Washington Examiner. So Kimberly, what does a national emergency entail? What does it mean, and what's the significance of the president declaring one?
So he just declared it yesterday, and what it means is that there are going to be additional federal resources that are given to the effort. It removes a lot of the red tape that we see around where Medicaid funds can go, for example. It allows for more treatment, and it means that federally they're saying this is a priority for us and we're going to work on it aggressively.
So then what is the next step? Where do we go from here?
The next step is that we'll really start seeing details about what they're going to do on this epidemic. We are expecting to see access to naloxone, which is a overdose reversal drug. And we're expecting to see more access to other treatment options that really help people with some of these addiction problems.
You were touching on this before, but maybe you can expand a little bit more on this in terms of what the resources the administration can and will likely be using.
Right. Well, there are resources that are set apart for federal emergencies, and usually they're set apart for things like hurricanes or other natural disasters. But the opioid epidemic has gotten so bad. That's why the Federal Commission recommended that President Trump declare a national emergency. So those funds that would typically go to some of these other disasters are going toward the crisis, and they're going toward treatment and toward recovery and toward a lot of these expensive programs that are required in order to really stave off some of the issues that are occurring because of the epidemic.
Okay, very good. So we're going to continue to watch the opioid crisis. I want to shift gears to the health care bill now. What are you hearing from your sources about what could potentially happen with the health care overhaul? Could it happen as soon as this fall? What are you thinking?
Well, there are several different things that are happening right now. First of all, the House Freedom Caucus has filed a petition today saying that they would like for the repeal and delay bill, which would delay the implementation of Obamacare repeal for 2 years. They want to see the House vote on it. It's difficult to say whether that'll go anywhere. Basically, they have to have enough signatures on this petition to even bring a vote to the floor. Now, this is the same bill that didn't pass in the Senate, so it's hard to see it go anywhere. It does put House members on the record for how they would vote. And the other thing that we're hearing really is that senators are saying, we're ready to move on, we're ready to work in a bipartisan way. We want to come up with solutions that will stabilize the health insurance exchanges.
And what's going to be interesting is to see how all of this plays out with midterm elections right around the corner. Kimberly Leonard, senior healthcare writer for the Washington Examiner. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
A mother from Mexico was granted permission to stay in the U.S. for another 6 months to care for her 8-year-old daughter recovering from cancer. A Vatican news agency says Bishop Mark Seitz of El Paso, Texas, and other religious leaders helped Maria Elena de Loera get another temporary residence permit. A train collision just east of Alexandria, Egypt has killed at least 36 people. A statement by the Egyptian Railways Authority says the train was traveling from Alexandria from Cairo when it crashed into the back of another train. Another 120 people were hurt. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says he wants a meeting with President Donald Trump. Maduro has asked his foreign minister to approach the U.S. about arranging a telephone call or meeting. He is offering his hand to President Trump, the same man he routinely ridicules. The Trump administration has called Maduro a dictator and issued sanctions against him amid financial and political crisis there. U.S.-backed Syrian fighters continue advancing in the northern Syria of Raqqa. Forces launched a wide offensive to capture the city in June. Since then, fighters have worked to move ISIS out. A U.S. Army colonel says they are continuing to pressure the terror group. The U.S. ambassador to Kenya urges people to peacefully resolve election results disputes.
Violence must never be an option. No Kenyan should die because of an election. Kenya's future is more important than any election. Leaders, above all, need to make that clear.
Ambassador Robert Godek spoke at a press conference today in Nairobi. His comments came amid violence in the country's capital after this week's elections. Besides Nairobi, most of the country has remained calm. An earthquake strikes the northern Philippines. A 6.3 magnitude quake was felt in Manila. Office workers in the capital left their buildings, but no damage was apparent after the quake struck about midday today. Pope Francis is ordering a Belgian Catholic charity to stop offering euthanasia in its psychiatric hospitals.
Che questo è un peccato contro il Creatore, contro Dio Creatore.
The Holy Father condemned euthanasia at this audience in 2014 when he called it a sin against the Creator. This week, the Holy See press office confirmed the Pope ordered the Brothers of Charity group not to perform euthanasia. Belgium is only one of 2 countries, along with the Netherlands, where doctors are legally allowed to kill people with mental health problems at their request. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Edward, what exactly is the Pope asking here, and is it a formal order if they don't comply?
Well, what the Pope is asking is that they adhere to an ultimatum at the end of August to stop offering euthanasia in these 15 hospitals. If they don't comply, then there's a threat that they might have their Catholic status taken away, and the 3 religious who are on the board of this charity would have canonical procedures taken against them. So that's the current situation.
What about the timing here, Edward? Why has the Pope done this now?
Well, it really comes after concerted efforts from the Superior General of the Order, the part of the branch of this charity, to try and bring the bishops, the Belgian bishops, to support him in rescinding this policy. And then when that didn't work, he took it to the Vatican and 2 congregations. When that also didn't seem to work, they thought about this ultimatum, and so that's why it's been issued now.
Edward, we know that Belgium, like so many other European countries, is becoming more and more secular, but how serious of a problem is euthanasia in Belgium, and how did it get this way?
It's got very serious. Ever since the law came into force back in 2002, there's been what many have warned would be a slippery slope in the cases of euthanasia. It's now gone up to 4,000 cases a year, apparently. And in 2013, they even went so far as legalizing the euthanasia of children who are terminally ill. So the situation has got very serious. Between 2014 and 2015, there were as many as 20% of 600 euthanasia cases of terminally ill patients who had psychiatric disorders. So this is becoming a great source of concern, not only in the church, but also within the medical profession, particularly those involved in psychiatric care.
Very concerning indeed for so many, and we hope that our EWTN viewers continue to pray for life in parts of Europe. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks so much, Edward.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Coming up, North Korea crisis, how one group is helping those suffering from a health emergency in the communist country. And becoming a saint, we highlight the changes made by Pope Francis to the process with Crux's John Allen. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Officials in the Philippines confirmed the country's first bird flu outbreak. Health officials say no animal-to-human transmission has been reported, but at least 400,000 birds will be culled in response. Experts believe ducks were the original virus carrier. Despite tension between the U.S. and North Korea, American groups continue to provide aid to the communist nation. Our next guest regularly visits the country to treat North Koreans for tuberculosis, an infectious disease caused by bacteria, especially in the lungs. Stephen Linton is the founder and president of the Eugene Bell Foundation, dedicated to treating tuberculosis in North Korea. He joins us now via Skype from South Carolina. So an official from North Korea's Ministry of Public Health says multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, the kind of TB you treat, is the biggest health emergency in the country. Why is that, Stephen?
Well, TB has been around for as long as we have recorded history. Even the mummies in the pyramids show evidence of TB. And it is particularly dangerous to people who have a compromised immune system. This means that when people are old, or when they're sick, or malnourished, or maybe they work too hard, stay up too late, abuse their bodies, whatever, their immune systems are compromised, and tuberculosis can spread easily to these people because it spreads by air like a cold.
And your foundation treats some 1,500 patients per year. How do you work with the North Korean government, which is a closed communist regime, to care for the patients?
Well, we've been working in tuberculosis since 1997. And we first began working with tuberculosis by invitation from the North Korean Ministry of Public Health. And so every visit is essentially a visit by invitation. So we submit a list of delegation members. This list is approved, and we get an invitation, which results in a visa, and we go and we work with the Ministry of Health and local caregivers.
And you've been to North Korea more than 80 times. What is it like helping sick patients there in North Korea?
Well, when you get beyond the politics and the rhetoric, North Korea is very much like anywhere else. These are people who have failed treatment with regular TB medications, which are now provided by the World Health Organization Global Fund. So when we visit one of our sites on a regular schedule, people who have been treated for TB and failed, who are continuously positive for TB, then come to the sites, and we test them with gene experts, which is a very sophisticated diagnostic machine that's made in the United States. It tests the DNA of the TB that they have, and if it confirms them to be resistant to regular TB drugs, we put them on a special program.
Stephen, tell us how your organization, your foundation, is received by the North Koreans. I know religion isn't necessarily as big of a role there as it is in the United States.
Well, when I founded the Eugene Bell Foundation, I deliberately used the name of my great-grandfather, even though we are not in any way connected to any religious denomination, because self-identity is important. And while North Koreans are not always enthusiastic about religion, they do respect tradition, and our family, having worked in Korea for 4 generations, made a positive impact. What it means to the North Koreans is that this is a Christian group that does things in a Christian manner. And actually, the person who has taken most advantage of this witness has been Father Gerard Hammond, a Catholic missionary from Marino, who has been working with us for 20 years. He has invited so much Catholic participation on our delegations that North Koreans often think that we are actually a Catholic organization.
Stephen Linton, founder and president of the Eugene Bell Foundation. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you very much for your interest in North Korea.
The persecution of Christians in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East is widespread and often leads to death. But now, after a change in the rules for sainthood, some could soon be recognized by the church. Our Lauren Ashburn has more with an expert on the subject.
Joining us now is John Allen, editor of Crux, a Catholic news publication. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Lauren, good to see you.
You say the Pope's new pathway to sainthood highlights anti-Christian violence. What do you mean by that?
Well, Pope Francis recently overhauled the rules for sainthood, essentially adding a new pathway to a halo. Traditionally, the 2 main pathways were either martyrdom, that is, being killed in explicit hatred of the faith for explicitly religious motives. And you can think of Father Jacques Hamel, who was killed by 2 assassins professing loyalty to ISIS while saying Mass. That was a classic instance of martyrdom in the full sense. The other pathway to sainthood has been heroic virtue, that is, possessing the virtues of the faith to a heroic degree, an extraordinary degree. Pope Francis has now added a 3rd category, which is the offer of one's life, that is, voluntarily giving up one's life for someone else. And this tracks much better with the contemporary realities of anti-Christian persecution. We live in a world in which there are an estimated, somewhere between 100,000 and 10,000 new Christians killed every year for reasons related to their faith. But it's not always classic martyrdom. I mean, let me give you a very concrete example.
Before you do that, can we talk about the 2 Catholic missionaries who were killed in Burundi in 2011? Would that be a good example?
Well, that's another great example,
yeah.
Right. There was a Catholic nun by the name of Lucretia Mamic, a Croatian, and an Italian lay missionary by the name of Marco Bardazzi, who were killed in 2011 when one of these lawless kind of criminal gangs raided the sisters' convent. Sister Lucretia was shot immediately in the head by them.
Awful.
Marco was taken hostage and then later got killed when they were trapped in a crossfire with police. Now, both of these people obviously gave up their lives for others.
And
it wasn't classic martyrdom. I mean, the guys who raided this convent weren't killing them because they were Christians, right? They just wanted to steal stuff.
But they could be considered under these new rules for sainthood, or for the halo, as you say.
They had chosen to live in one of the most lawless corners of the world, a place that was one of the epicenters of the HIV/AIDS virus, that has one of the lowest per capita incomes in the world, highest rates of infant mortality, on and on. Why did they choose to be there? They chose to be there because they felt called by God to do so. I mean, from their end, you know, their giving up their life had everything to do with the gospel and with their faith, even though that might not necessarily have been the case with their killers. And in that sense, what Pope Francis has done is clear the way for raising to sainthood a much wider cross-section.
John Allen, editor of Crux, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Lauren.
Dr. Ruth Pfau, a German nun who devoted her life to the eradication of leprosy in Pakistan, has died. She was known in the country as Pakistan's Mother Teresa. The Prime Minister announced a state funeral for Pfau. It will be held next Friday. She is being remembered as a beacon of hope for underprivileged people. Sister Ruth was 87. You can read more about her life right now at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Up next, pro-life music.
Forgive me, my child, my little one. You never had a chance to start. Whoa.
We speak to artist Joyce M. Bartholomew about how her faith inspires her singing. Today, the church remembers the patron of television, St. Clare of Assisi, a mystic and friend of St. Francis. Together, they founded the Poor Clares. Our foundress, Mother Angelica, became a Poor Clare in 1945. The Basilica of St. Clare is in Assisi, Italy. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Our next guest is promoting pro-life values through her music. She performed at the Susan B. Anthony List's 10-year gala this year, where Vice President Mike Pence was in attendance.
What was your name? What were you meant to be? Wish I could have known you.
She is a Christian recording artist with more than 14 million YouTube views for her hits, What Was Your Name, Fight for Your Marriage, and Please Forgive Me. Joining us from Naples, Florida via Skype is pro-life advocate and Christian singer Joyce M. Bartholomew. Joyce, how does your faith inspire you to write and sing your own music?
It is the reason I am even singing and writing all the music. I just feel that it is the power behind the music. I'm doing this for God, and I'm doing this for pro-life. If it weren't for Jesus Christ in my heart, in my spirit, I wouldn't be writing the music. It's why I do everything.
You became involved with the pro-life movement when you volunteered at a crisis pregnancy center in Toronto, Canada. How did that experience impact you?
I was a counselor there. I volunteered. I loved it. I loved the girls. Some of them were teenagers. Some of them were much older women than me. I loved them. I had no idea I would be singing and standing for life later. That whole experience just opened my heart to the entire pro-life movement. And from then on, I have just been a fierce advocate for pro-life. It just completely just made me just love them even more.
And in that capacity, you're a spokesperson for Preborn, an organization dedicated to helping pregnancy centers get grants for ultrasounds. What reaction do you get from the public?
I usually get a good reaction. I honestly do. And it sounds like maybe some people will be haters on that, but I think that's probably a spiritual warfare, a spiritual attack against God. And so I try not to take it personally when they have negative things to say. I try not to take things personally.
Sure. Joyce, tell us, what are you working on next? What are your next projects?
I am working on album number 2, and I'm hoping to finish that. I write all the songs myself with a team from Nashville, and also Michael W. Smith in Pasadena on August 18th. I'll be and Brandon Heath. They're headlining a benefit concert for 3 pregnancy centers, and I will be opening up there with some musicians in Pasadena, California at Lake Avenue Church. And then also opening up in Celebrate Freedom in Labor Day weekend, their 10th anniversary. And I'll also be singing the Star Spangled Banner there for the 3rd year in a row. Preborn is the sponsors for both of these events. And these are benefit type of concerts.
Well, I'm sure with all of your projects, I'm sure they are a labor of love. Joyce M. Bartholomew, a Christian contemporary artist, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a blessing for me to be here.
Tonight, EWTN Pro-Life Weekly features Joe Scheidler. He's the founder of Pro-Life Action League and helped shape the pro-life movement. Scheidler says his faith is his motor.
Well, it's everything. I think one of the greatest gifts next to life itself is being a Catholic. Religion is absolutely the essence of fighting this battle.
You can see more of Catherine's interview with Joe Scheidler, including why he quit his day job after Roe versus Wade. Tonight on Pro-Life Weekly, it airs at 11 p.m. Eastern right here on EWTN. It will re-air Sunday morning at 10. And we thank you for watching tonight and for this entire week. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back here on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.